I don't think things are slowing down. I think things are speeding up. Just the existence of coding agents means that coding agents themselves will speed up because it's so much faster to build everything. And you haven't really yet felt the impact of open source models or all of this data center build out yet. I think you're going to see tokens become a lot cheaper. I think the next iteration is going to be when you can do that thing where you run 10 iterations all in parallel and only pick the best one. And then, by the way, why stop at 10? Why not go to 100?
Hi, this is John McBride, and you're listening to Open Source Ready, a bi-weekly series where we discuss the evolution of open source software and its impact on the tech landscape. Along with my co-host, Brian Douglas, we'll explore topics like open source AI, the business, and sustainability of open source. Open Source Ready is brought to you by Heavybit, the leading investor in developer-first startups. For more information, visit heavybit.com. If you're interested in being a guest on this show, or you would like to suggest a topic, find us on x.com/opensourceready. Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of Open Source Ready. Here again, always with Brian. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. I'm double mic'd. I've got a new mic that I haven't hooked up yet. But
nice.
Yeah, we were talking about the buzz that was happening our failed episode that we never shipped. So
it'll be like a ghost secret episode that will drop in like 15 years or something.
Yeah,
it'll be legendary, right? All the buzz.
Us basically planning our next guest was like the entire episode.
That was the whole episode. It's true. But yeah, we didn't come here to talk about buzzing mics. We came here to talk about the buzz with Quinn Slack of Sourcegraph, CEO. We would love for you to intro yourself. What have you been up to?
I have been hacking a lot on coding agents. So, at Sourcegraph, we built AMP, and we wanted to be building for the people that want to be on the frontier. And we want to make AMP the coding agent that people use today, but it's how everybody will be using a coding agent a year from now. So it's been a crazy ride. There's nothing I'd rather be doing than building a coding agent right now, but it is just the noisiest, craziest, fastest moving thing that I think anyone has experienced. So it's a thrill.
Yeah, this is very funny. It's almost full circle because, sometime last year we had Thorsten Bell on, who is on the AMP team. And I think at the time he was being very coy and alluding to something he was working on and was like, this is going to be big, like it's going to be crazy. And now I use it every day. So thank you, AMP.
I was thinking about that episode in preparation to this episode because,
because
he was like, came from Zed, previously Sourcegraph, went to Zed, did some stuff for Zed, and then went back to Sourcegraph. And then we were just chatting about compilers, but then we also started asking like, okay, what is the thing that you're doing now? Like, what can you talk about? And he was not very specific. And then you guys launched maybe like a couple weeks later.
Yeah. I'm very curious to hear, the story of how it came to be, like from the product org, like what was the conceptualization of that? How did you decide to kind of make this big pivot into AMP as a product? We didn't get it from Thorsten, so maybe we can get it from you.
So, okay, AI has been pretty great for code ever since Tab 9, actually Jacob Jackson back in 2017 or so. And then GitHub Copilot props them for autocomplete. And we've seen all of these iterations, but until about January, AI was good at one step of coding. You could ask it a question, it would do RAG, it would give you an answer. And there was a lot of people that were piling so much complexity to make that better and better, but there needed to be a fundamental advance. And it's kind of crazy, but it turns out that 3.5 Sonnet that was released the June before that actually had a lot of agentic capabilities that were not fully uncovered until really February of this year, of 2025. So right at the start of February is when we started building AMP. Thorsten and I and some other people on the team basically ripped out everything. And we said, what if we just let the model rip and continue and iterate? And we didn't want to put any kind of constraints on it, no tool permission, no token constraints, no price constraints. And it was expensive, it was powerful, it was kind of scary that it would just go do things, but it was incredible. And once you saw that, you never wanted to use anything else. And I think, around the same time, Claude Code was being built. And this was at the time when Windsurf had showed with a much more limited agent that you could take multiple steps. Cursor at the time, they had gotten out of the composer land, but still it was very limited. And Claude Code and AMP were essentially the first two publicly known just unconstrained agents. And we saw that was going to make everything that came before it look obsolete. And everyone who had any kind of user base, customer base, whatever, would have to shed everything they had as quickly as possible and make a full agent. So that was pretty interesting and scary in many ways for us, because we also had a business at the time, and we had a ton of enterprise customers. And so we really quickly figured out, how do we start sharing with the world this tough medicine that you're not going to be able to control costs anymore, that these tools are so much more powerful, that there's some people that are going to understand how to use them and other people are going to be resistant, and they're like a freight train. It doesn't care about any of that. The technology that's underlying all of this has advanced, and that is going to completely change how we use AI for coding. And it's going to be just so much more powerful.
Yeah.
So we saw that, and that was, roughly in March. And then it's just been nuts ever since. And I think everyone has seen that with all the coding agents that have come out.
Yeah, one of the things I wanted to ask you about was the, kind of economics of a lot of this. I've done some research, and it's honestly just mind-boggling. Like between the data centers and the electricity, like on that end, and then the API-based token costs that, a lot of people are familiar with on OpenAI's APIs or Anthropic's APIs. How do you kind of square the circle on a lot of the economics of a lot of this? We could obviously get into the AMP-free stuff, but just from a business perspective, how can consumers sort of square that circle? But then also you as a provider, what do the economics of that actually look like?
Well, one of the painful transitions that a lot of other coding tools had to go through starting a few months ago was switching from these all-you-can-eat subscription plans to pay-as-you-go. And this is something that we started with from day one on AMP, doing pay-as-you-go. So you pay for the tokens, and that meant that we didn't have to worry about losing a lot of money or watering down the product, because the prices are uncapped. It is not possible to cap them, and they're so much more expensive than anything people have paid in the past. But the thing is, the fact that they're so much more valuable means people and companies are willing to pay. Now, not everybody. There's a lot of companies out there that they said, well, the way we've always bought software is we have one price, maybe it's per seat, and we'd like to continue doing that with coding agents. And that is not possible. We've had a ton of conversations with people who say that, and I understand why they want that, but what they're asking for is something that is fundamentally not possible. It's like if I went to PG&E, our power company here in California, and I said, actually, I would like to have unlimited power and not pay you. They would say, no can do. And there's still a lot of companies that are struggling there, and that's holding them back from adoption. The market is so big, though, that for us, we've just worked with the companies that do see value in this and that want to be a year ahead.
I'm curious, when you're going to the pay-as-you-go model, you might have thought through a bunch of different other ideas. Devin was popularized of being the, I guess they pitched the agentic workflow. They ended up shipping it later, but when they shipped the pricing, it was $500 a month. And that was shocking. And everyone was like, oh, $500 a month, that's insane. Some people paid it, and then Claude Code, which came out months after your, or maybe it was around the same time. I'm not even sure what Claude Code actually shipped, but it shipped with the max plan that was $200 a month alongside of that. And I think folks started coming around the corner of okay, $200 a month, I can get that. But even in the last couple of months, Claude's definitely clawed back a bit of the functionality and features and access to models. So I guess what I'm saying is what were you thinking when you went pay-as-you-go? Did you consider the monthly subscription? And then do you have a comment on now the world is kind of moving towards pay-as-you-go? It feels like more of reality now.
So yeah, Claude came out with Claude Code in February, and at the time it was pay-as-you-go. And then it was in April, I believe, that they introduced Claude Max, and they've had a few different changes to that. And if we could offer a $200 per month subscription, that would be all you can eat, we absolutely would. Now, not even Anthropic can do that, or OpenAI can't do that. They still have rate limits that get in the way. For now, just given how fast everything is moving, if we were to have rate limits and pricing and have that all be so complex, and then by the way, you never get it right the first time, and so you have many legacy pricing models, just go digging in the cursor settings or elsewhere to see all these legacy things. That's devoting 20% of your engineering team to managing all that complexity, because you cannot mess up billing. So we just said, we're not going to try to satisfy the person who really wants to pay maximum of $200 a month. Now, there's a lot of people who use AMP who pay less than that, including with AMP free. But we're just going to be building the very best product, and we think that's going to dominate. But it's become clear there's a few other things going on that at times privilege the companies like Anthropic and OpenAI that have their own models and data centers, and at times make that a liability. I think that's the big question. So if you're Anthropic, you have a fixed amount of capacity. They rely on AWS and Google for it. If you're OpenAI, you have Azure and all these other data centers. And at certain times of day, they have more ability to give cheaper free tokens than they do at other times of day. So they've got that variability that's, their peak load that they've committed to their enterprise customers and their kind of average rate. All of those tokens are essentially free for them to play with. And every second that capacity goes unused is, wasted money. They pay for the marginal power consumption, but they have the ability to give away cheap tokens in a way that application layer companies like AMP and Cursor and Windsurf don't have. But at the same time, you have the countervailing force of open source models getting better and better, and all of the other data center build-outs that are not from one of the foundation model companies, where they have a lot of GPUs that in some cases are sitting there. There's a lot of other constraints on them. It's not like there's a ton of unused capacity. But if you build out the data center and you're not Anthropic or OpenAI, then you'd be looking for a moderate return on those GPUs that can beat the marginal cost of power. And that's an opportunity for companies like us to then have that pricing power exerted on Anthropic and OpenAI and to compete. So there's so many unknowns. I think the biggest thing that we're watching is how much better are open source models becoming, because that's going to drive inference down to the marginal cost of power. And, Anthropic and OpenAI are really hoping to be charging more than the marginal cost of the electrons.
Yeah, I was just going to say that seems to be maybe the greatest threat to some of these, I guess, products, really, where there's like a really great open source LLM, the weights that I can go and download, and the non-existent Blackwell GPUs that I have in my house, I could go and run, right? And then like do my own inference, probably much slower since I wouldn't be able to who knows? I've seen some of these people with crazy GPU clusters in their house on home labs and stuff. So is that really like one of the ways that you could see a lot of this going is, the personal home GPU AI cluster thing?
I don't think most people are positioned close to a low cost of power. So I think that there's still a lot of economies of scale you get from data centers and build outs.
Yeah.
It's also a dynamic system where as long as open source models are trailing behind and they're not actually unlocking new capabilities, I don't think they're going to be that interesting because most of the excitement is on the frontier. If you, though, can take open source models and because they're slightly cheaper, they're more flexible, if you can run them on hardware that can perform inference much faster, like Grok or Cerebras. Grok is an amazing product. And if you would be able to, whenever someone wants to do something in a coding agent, run it 10 times and throw away the 9 worst ones, keep the 10th, that's the best. And if that kind of thing is made possible because of the increased flexibility, speed, and better cost of open source models, that's where you could actually make the case that a coding agent that uses open source models is superior, not just cheaper or faster, but superior. And that's when I think it gets really interesting. And with open source foundation models, you have so much more experimentation going on than the kind of product catalog that any single OpenAI or Anthropic-like company can provide. And they're also anchored at price. They have a single price that has to meet a lot of different customers' needs. And if they were to drop that to be viable for certain kinds of new applications that are on the frontier, then that would cause an immediate hit in revenue to, their other use cases that are not. Price discrimination is difficult for them.
Interesting. Yeah, I had not really considered that idea that, you could have many of these small models, kind of running parallel. I guess this is something Continue sort of does, Brian, right? Like you could have many parallel jobs to then be able to sort of handpick the best one, right?
Yeah. So Continue, I'm not sure you're familiar with Continue, but yeah, we went the local model route.
Oh yeah, Continue's awesome.
Yeah, so like at the enterprise level, folks can choose their own models to run at local behind their firewall. And it's actually interesting because I know with the Gemini CLI, they have a router that's pretty aggressive. So you ask for the thing to do the thing, you want the agent to run, but it's going to switch over the flash pretty quickly. And it's not a great experience when you pay $20 a month and you're like, oh, you know what? You're giving me some garbage code. I'm spending time going back and forth and cleaning this up. At this point, I might as well just write it myself. And that's not a dig on Gemini. I could pay $200 a month and get a better experience. But the developers are pretty fickle. And if you want to get the best opportunity or to ship a bunch of stuff and try out what agents are really capable of, I think what you guys are doing are like amazing, specifically for AMP and doing pay as you go. But actually, I did want to transition and actually talk about AMP free because like I'm super excited what you guys are doing. I would love to hear how it's been going on your end, like what's the feedback from developers. But also, I did want to throw this one thing out there. Like back in my day, after 10 p.m., you get free calls on cell phones.
Oh yeah.
To start us out there, AMP at night, like off peak hours, like you can also get AMP free plus, and like maybe get some extra features to it. So
Extra little spice at night in AMP.
I love that. See, that's perfect because it aligns with when, in theory, tokens are cheaper because at the limit, there will probably be unused capacity over the weekends for, most people. Yeah, we should do that.
You heard it here first. It's great.
Yeah.
cool, yeah. If you want me to wear like a NASCAR jacket and have an AMP thing, I'll promote it and be like AMP at night.
Yeah, and weekends as well.
Yeah.
Weekends might be easier because everyone has a different night. And, I think we all know a few coders that code at night. I might have a few 4 a.m. nights every week, but definitely weekends. So you heard it here first. We will try to ship that. We'll see how it goes. But, that kind of experimentation, that is exactly what led us to AMP free. Fortune favors the bold here in coding agents. And if you want evidence of that, just look at the crazy kinds of investments that Anthropic and OpenAI are making, the like hundreds of billions of dollars. It's going into data centers, all of that. Like everyone is being incredibly bold here and everyone is making a big bet on the future. And we realized that the bet we made by making AMP in the first place to be a frontier coding agent, that was a really bold bet, but we need to keep following it up with things that are bolder and bolder. And so we took a look at the feedback we were getting from people using AMP. People said, hey, it's really good, but it's also really expensive. And we did not want to do what everyone else seemed to be doing, which was make a subscription plan, start burning a ton of money on our side in an unsustainable way, set ourselves up to then have to rug pull like it seems so many other tools did, not continue, obviously, and some have stayed away. We wanted to do something different. And we kind of started out as a joke. What if we show ads? And we then made some mock-ups and our own team was like, hey, actually, that's pretty non-intrusive. We talked to some companies that would want to advertise and they were willing to do it. I was surprised how receptive, other people were to it. And it turned out, even the day before launch, we were so successful in getting more advertisers that we just said, screw it, let's try to get like 15 more on. And we had just an incredible hit rate. We had, large advertising contracts signed between 6 p.m. and 8 a.m. the next morning of launch. So there was a ton of excitement here. And it also is doing something different. It's doing something bold. It was the first totally free coding agent. And it's not to say that, there's other temporarily free models that other coding agents can use. But what we've made is a commitment to always hustling and sourcing free good tokens that are going to work. So that right now, Grok Code Fast from XAI is free if you give them your data, which we do not require an AMP free. They might turn that off. And then if you're using free through any other tool, that's going to go away. But we've committed and we've sourced a lot of different places where good free tokens can be used through AMP free. So it was a big reception and I was shocked at how positive developers took it. I am glad because I think there's a realization that AI is really expensive and that this is a model that not only lets you mix and match, you can use our paid mode and free mode to kind of arrive wherever you want on your pricing spectrum. And it's also something where we need to charge for it. So there's not the expectation of, it should be free, as there is with a lot of other things. So it's been thrilling. And now it's just, how can we go even bigger and bolder? Like, the nights, weekends thing.
Yeah. This is so funny because we've actually recently had a conversation with Rachel Lee Neighbors, who is working a bunch in like agentic web and had previously been on the React team. And they had said that like ads on the internet in the like more broad agentic web is sort of like a dead model. And, I'm really curious how you see ads on AMP or I guess in any coding agent or really LLMs in general, because I do think this is coming more broadly. It wouldn't surprise me if like, and Quinn, tell me if you think I'm wrong, but it wouldn't surprise me if like OpenAI's ChatGPT started putting ads somewhere into like the platform just to start monetizing more with like all this money that's getting spent all over the place. Where do you see it evolving? Like, do you see ads on the web still being a thing going into the future in general in like an agentic future?
I do. ads are an incredibly efficient way to make money. And it's a very democratic way, a broad-based way. It's a way that makes it so that everybody can use a coding agent. And one of the things that always pained me is I love that we were being able to build on the frontier and without cost as a concern on our side, but it meant that AMP was closed to a lot of people. Claude Max, Claude Code, all these things were closed to a lot of people. And what's exciting is making this available to everyone. I was hanging out with Parag Agarwal, the former Twitter CEO who now runs Parallel Web Systems, and another guy, Noah Fraden. We were talking about this, and I came to them with this problem that we had. It was at one of these CEO retreats. And I said, AMP is so expensive, and we want to figure out how we can make it cheaper. And Parag says, from his background as someone who ran one of the biggest ad companies online in the world, go make ads. And that was another case where it sounded like a joke, but it is an incredible way to make money. And even if you think about all the work that every single person would have to do otherwise to go put in their credit card details, that's friction. If you can just use it, think of how you use google.com. You can use it from any computer, any device. You don't need to be signed in. It just works. Free is, and ad supported is an incredibly low friction way of making a product available.
Yeah, 100%. Why do you think people have an allergic reaction to like ads in general? Because I had a conversation back and forth on X with Thorsten about this, and he was like, your life is just better because there are ads. Like you get to use Google Maps because of ads, which is an incredible service and is like mapped out, every road that I can basically drive on. And I don't know what I would do without it. Why do you think people have such an allergic reaction to like the idea of ads and these things?
I think a lot of ads are in really poor taste. I think that if you can keep the quality up, if you can make it power a great product, if the ads can be from companies that you love and respect, if the ads can be targeted, if the ads can be actually useful. So you're seeing things that are relevant to what you're doing. And if you click an ad, the action is not just go talk to somebody. That's boring. Nobody wants to do that. If the action can be something like go add WorkOS user authentication to my application, automatically provision me an API key, or any of these other things, that's actually really valuable. And that's what ads should be. I think if you can do it well, then people accept them. And think about what Google does. So much of what you see when you search on Google is actually powered by ads. And I'm not just talking about the sponsored results, but the reason why Google is able to have a rich metadata structure of so much information out there is because advertisers have an incentive to create product listing ads, flight ads, movie show times. And in some cases that drives organic results. In some cases that drives paid results. But ads really they create such a strong incentive all around. And Google overall has done an incredible job. My wife works at Google, so I've seen just how much care they put into that. And that's just such an incredible engine. If we had Google that cost $200 a month and that had rate limits, it would be only available to the elite, and the whole world would be poorer as a result.
Yeah. I always go with this analogy when it comes to we're talking about ads. Like if I see a pair of jeans on Instagram and then I'm like on Amazon and it shows up, good chance if I see it on Instagram, it's been catered for me to be pitched to, and I'll probably end up buying something from Instagram ad. For context for listeners, I'm an elder millennial, so I grew up on Instagram. It gives me quality content. I like it. Okay, so don't come at me. But actually, I don't mind. Like when I go to a conference and I get a pair of socks from a booth, I actually do care about going and using something at KubeCon. The pair of socks is for me to remind myself, oh, I want to go try this because the name of the company I can't remember, but the socks I'll remember those. So when it comes to I just integrated Terso into one of my side projects.
Cool.
And it's a thing I've never tried. I've known about it for years. They just rewrote their entire SQLite database into Rust. So I'm like, cool. Time for me to go try it out finally. But my problem is I'll never remember, I need to do the thing. So if I remember to create a GitHub issue, maybe that's good. And I don't know if this is the way AMP works today because I haven't used AMP for yet. But if I was going to do a thing in my side project and was hey, I want a database, so you have this issue over here, Terso's a sponsor. Here's a sponsored experience with your MCP. I would love that cater experience. Hey, by the way, we've got MCP sponsored experience. Maybe you charge higher for that for a handheld experience. I'm converted immediately. I don't want to spend a ton of time going back and forth with the agent. I just want to get the thing done so I can use the thing and show my friends. And if I get a free access to that, I think just like Google Maps, Like I need a map for all the stuff that's in open source because that doesn't exist today. And like you think stars would help me navigate to like what's popular, but I need validation. And sometimes validation is coming through sponsored content. So to be honest, like I was a bit of a skeptic when I saw the initial pitch of like AMP free, but I actually talked to John. I talked to a few other folks that I work with that continue. And a lot of this makes sense. And I think you might be ahead of the curve on a lot of these things because I think ChatGPT is the same deal. Like I would love to get recommended, hey, I saw you were chatting about this like flight. Here's a couple tickets from that other session that you were chatting with, or give me an email.
Yeah.
Remind me of that session and let me kick back into that. So I don't know where the world goes. And like you guys have the team like ready to deploy and scale out this stuff. But as a person on the sideline, but also like a practitioner and participant, I'm excited about this space and excited about what you guys do.
Yeah. I think you called out a bunch of really good examples of how this can work. The first is just, Terso. I've heard amazing things about Terso. I too want to try it out. And they're a new company. And if you're a new company, you got to break out of the noise. It is so noisy out there. I mean, if you go to KubeCon, there's like 1 million booths. If we didn't have the ability for companies like Terso to reach people in a targeted way, then everyone would still be stuck using mainframe databases or Oracle or, the things that you know about. So ads also are a way for the little guy to become a not so little guy and find their customers like you and me. And also this idea of really tailored experience, making AMP work even better if you're using certain technologies. There's 1 million technologies that are out there and there's, a lot of coding agents, but what we've heard a demand to do is go and make it so that, say, if you're using AMP with Amazon Web Services, then we have guarantee that it's going to use the latest docs, that it knows the context of your account. And that's something where an advertiser like Amazon Web Services would then pay AMP for those sessions. And that is a way that the product can be made better. And, it's not something where it's secretly inserted. It's all really clear to the user. But, it's kind of like the Google product listing ads or Google flight ads. It's, product functionality that is enabled. The incentive to go and make that even better is enabled by advertising. So there's a lot of stuff there in what you said.
Yeah, very interesting. One of the things I wanted to ask you about, and I'm curious if you heard about this, is 402X or X402 payments protocol, which is this like Coinbase thing for micropayments, primarily for agents. So it's kind of the other side where like me, a user, could go and like, I guess, give an agent my wallet with, like a couple bucks in there. And then it can go make like, tiny micropayments as it hits 402 HTTP statuses, which is payment required in HTTP. So a lot of this scaffolding is out there. I'm very curious if you all have thought about that other side on AMP, where like, I don't even know what this would be. Like, hey, AMP, go use my micro wallet to go spin up something on AWS, or go get a managed Terso DB and spend a couple cents or dollars to go and do that. Like you have the payment capabilities. Like, have you envisioned that side of it at all, more from the consumer agentic actually making payments side?
No, haven't looked into that at all. Really interesting though.
Yeah, I think they cut this in like a couple months ago or something. And Cloudflare is obviously very interested in it because they want to build like a whole platform for, the app store of agents on the internet as they own the network. Brian, we mentioned this in the last episode. Have you looked at this much?
No, I gave it a skim, and like my analogy is like the Brave browser. Like you use the internet and then Brave tokens, you like get Brave tokens as a consumer of it. I think on the inverse, so like Quinn, my background's I did DevRel at GitHub. DevRel is like my blood, and I just love using products, specifically DevTools. Like my thought would be going back to the Terso experience. Terso, brand new database, rewritten in Rust, needs more attention, adoption. Like to go find those like users to go use the tool and build stuff with it. I imagine the 402 would actually be really interesting, in particular if AMP would be like, hey, we're doing a hackathon, 500 people in a room or across the world, 10,000 people. We're all using Terso, but you got to build something real and you got to use it and you got to get some real adoption and like get to the point where you're not just like greenfield shipping a thing, but you have some real problems and some edge cases that you discover. What I'm finding a ton, and that kind of like still the same vein, but like I went to Nigeria, spoke about basically building an agents. It was a room full of folks at Open Source Community Africa. A lot of folks had no context around AI agents. They just knew ChatGPT. And majority of folks are just copy and pasting from ChatGPT. And all they just need is like a quick little story and a demo, and they're off to the races. And that's what I did on the ground at the event. Gave a workshop, build a mobile app. Everyone built it along with me. And the way I built the workshop was I built the app myself, 7 commits. And then I said, hey, agent, build now 7 markdown files based on these commits, teaching people how to use, not actually how to write the code, but how to write the prompt to let the agent go build the code. And then the next wave was basically, now we have all the prompts written in the markdown. Now give me links to like blogs and articles or like web performance and stuff that would enhance the learning. And what we ended up doing is like getting halfway through showing the app, but everyone got to clone the repo, take it home, see all the prompts, pick their favorite agent, and like go build the thing together or on their own in isolation. But like I'm going to like back to Terso is like an opportunity to have an engaged crowd, to build a thing, to have adoption, to get to the next level of feedback that's not just like, oh, I installed it. Cool, t-shirt, please. No, I installed it. I've got to leverage on like real things. And for that, can you also get like return my 402x payment or whatever it's called? Yeah, that's where my mind goes. And I feel like I'm just like basically in the writer's room with the AMP team. Hopefully you'll take this information back to your team and put it on the whiteboard and you can track this stuff or throw it at a linear ticket. But I think, honestly, that you're kind of paving the way for a bunch of other folks to kind of think about this stuff. So like my wheels are already turning. So
Yeah.
I'll DM Ryan and other folks on the team, the builders live stream, and just throw a bunch of ideas out there.
Yeah, that's awesome. With AMP free and seeing ads, we could even like bank up a small balance, even if you've never paid us, have no credit card on file, that then you could distribute via, the 402 status code. I think the possibilities are really interesting. And especially once you have an agent that's, if you ask the agent to go build an application, it's got to make a lot of choices about what technologies it should use. Now, we never want those choices to be swayed by advertising, but for the user, if they could be swayed by what services can it integrate really nicely with, and can you just have automatic payments set up with, that feels like a legitimate thing, and it could make a lot of things easier.
Yeah, it makes a ton of sense. More philosophically and wax poetically, I guess, you're on the edge, like you're building a lot of this and obviously being the first to do a lot of these things. Like, do you see any of this slowing down, the speed picking up? Like, where are the bumps in the road that you see, being on the edge of a lot of this?
Yeah, everyone wants it to slow down. Everyone who's buying coding agents for a big company wants it to slow down and say, okay, great. Now we want you to use just this model because this is the only one that's been approved. And we want pricing predictability and all of this. And we just constantly see other coding agents make choices that if you really dig down, they're assuming that things are going to slow down. So no, I don't think things are slowing down. I think things are speeding up. I think that just the existence of coding agents means that coding agents themselves will speed up because it's so much faster to build everything. And you haven't really yet felt the impact of open source models or all of this data center build out yet. I think you're going to see tokens become a lot cheaper. You're going to see the inference overall become a lot cheaper. I hope you see power become cheaper. And I think the next iteration is going to be when you can do that thing where you run 10 iterations all in parallel and only pick the best one. And then, by the way, why stop at 10? Why not go to 100? Why not try many different models and do that programmatically? And that requires a totally new way of building a code base, of building a workflow. And that's really exciting to think about. Right now, we've seen the impact from coding agents that are dropped in essentially existing code bases with very minimal change to a workflow or the structure of the code base. And still, they do so much. And just imagine what they can do if they could run tests reliably, quickly, if they could build reliably quickly. Most people don't even have their coding agent set up to go try their app in the browser. And people who have the Playwright MCP set up, half the time I ask them, they say, oh yeah, I can't actually log into my app. Or they have to, set it up and get everything just right. So we're just scratching the surface of what even coding agents today can do.
Yeah.
It is not slowing down.
Yeah, it's kind of my feeling as well. I mean, you talking about that made me think of when Brian and I were at the Linux Foundation and I was sort of helping the technology wing of the LF, look at and evaluate different technologies to, like Cursor or Windsurf or whatever, like what they could adopt, like what their engineers could adopt. And it was a lot of that like, oh, we want to like adopt a thing and that'll be like the license we have for 18 months. And I'm like, that's a really long time for like to lock in something in AI right now. Like that's a lifetime.
Mm-hmm.
Like we got to be way more flexible than that, right?
Yeah, I paid an annual subscription to a AI, basically Google Docs, but AI powered. It was pretty early in the days that Google Docs didn't quite have a good tool. And I think I probably paid for it in December and stopped using it by March because I think the Anthropic model got so much better. And I'm like, oh man, never again. Like I can't pay annual contracts anymore as like a solo person.
Yeah.
Like I'd rather like just pay for the couple months I use it and then I'll remember to cancel it whenever I remember. But like I just canceled HBO Max after like almost a year of not watching it. So like I'm pretty bad at this type of stuff. So please, don't lock me in the contracts.
If you roll that into a company that's trying to build a coding agent, for example, so much of building a software company with subscriptions, especially when you get in the enterprise, is based on all the assumptions and data that we have for the last 15 years, where if you acquire a customer, you can probably keep them for 5 years. Enterprises don't churn that often, and the contract is probably going to grow. It's high margin. You're not going to need to reinvent the product and have a total R&D cycle every single year. All of that is how SaaS became so incredible over the last 15 years, and none of those assumptions hold going into this new world. So if you are even paying a sales rep 10% commission on the year one ARR, all of a sudden you have way less margin and it's probably not going to renew. So everything has been called into question. And if you're citing some headline ARR number that you have and you're making headcount decisions based on that number, because in the past, if that was SaaS revenue, that would have made sense. You cannot be doing that now. It's incredibly, incredibly risky. So I don't think that has quite rippled through the whole industry.
Yeah. I'm actually very curious if you'd be willing to comment on, kind of the state of the tech landscape with jobs and like the layoffs and stuff. I find it very curious because I have a similar instinct where, it seems that with coding agents and with, the convention of all these LLMs and things, there's just going to be more software out there. There's a lot more software out there, but we're also going to have this velocity move much faster, like you said, where it's like we can't really rely on, having a SaaS that's just going to renew year over year and not have to be agile and go and like rebuild pieces of it or rebuild the whole thing if we need to like go and find market fit again, which in my eyes would mean we need more people like boots on the ground and stuff. Is that a right assumption to have that like there's just going to be so much more software out there, so we need more software engineers, or have you seen the opposite?
I think that'd be very complex. I think overall vibe coding, as it's taken to the extreme where you literally don't look at the code and you just build stuff by prompting, I think that's been a dud.
Yeah.
I think that ultimately you have to express unambiguously what you want to a computer. And at a certain point, that is the skill of a programmer. And I don't think it's a good goal for vibe coding where you cut out the developer entirely. That's just not going to exist because at a certain point, if you're really good at vibe coding, you're being so unambiguous that you are a programmer. I think you're going to see a lot more people writing some code. I think you're going to see a lot more code written. And for us at Sourcegraph, we also have code search. And we think there's going to be 1,000 times more code searches. And the number of companies with a large volume of code it's going to be so much greater in the future.
Yeah.
So yes, all those things we absolutely see. And at the same time, when it comes to jobs, I don't know what the impact is going to be from greater automation. Typically, when there's already unbounded demand for something, if you automate, you don't actually reduce the number of jobs. What I do see is a big disruption where there's a lot of people that are not adapting as fast as they need to. And they're in denial about AI. They say, oh, I used it. It doesn't work. What is everyone going on about? We've tried to address this with AMP through one thing we have, which is thread sharing. You can share your threads automatically with your team so they can see how you're using it and learn from that. But I think that's going to cause a lot of people, maybe half of developers, to just not get on this train. And they will quickly find themselves being perhaps negative marginal product, which is really tough. The good news is there's a way to avoid that, which is figure out how to make it work.
Yeah, a friend of the show, Mitchell Hashimoto, had a great thread on X where he was sharing an AMP thread and was just being like, here's how I built a legitimate feature in Ghosty, the terminal emulator, for using AMP. And I even learned something from it. Just like the way he flowed and like worked with it was a little different than the ways that I even thought you could. I think a lot of people found that educational, right?
Yeah. Seeing how someone actually uses it. And when you look at Mitchell's threads, when he's using AMP, you can tell that there's a programmer on the other side of the keyboard. He is a programmer. He's telling it
Exactly.
what to do in programming terms, not like, hey, AMP, vibe code me a new feature in Ghosty.
Yeah. Well, we're running out of time, so I have to transition us to reads, which means, Quinn, I got to ask you, are you ready to read?
Yes.
Read.
All right, well, I'll kick us off here. I just had one read, which I just thought was so fascinating. And I thought, Quinn, you might find it interesting since you're a Go programmer, or at least I think I've looked at some of your Go code on GitHub.
Oh, yeah.
And this is the green tea garbage collector, which is this new experimental garbage collector, which for those unaware, Go is a programming language out of Google. It's very C-like. And they built it to be, very scalable across teams and these teams shipping micro architectures and microservices and stuff. But it's a garbage collected language, which means that you don't actually really manage any of the actual memory under the hood. But this new garbage collector is supposedly like so much better. One of the quotes from this article is, many workloads spend around 10% less time in the garbage collector, but some workloads see a reduction of up to 40%. And that's always been the kind of gnarly thing about garbage collectors is it's got to go spend a bunch of time in your program actually garbage collecting your memory. I'm very excited for this. So I just thought it was a fun little bit of programming coolness that's happening in Go.
Cool. I'm just looking at the post. It seems like it operates in pages instead of individual objects.
Yeah, I think that's one of the criticisms that a lot of people have of Go in general is that it was kind of, like not dumb in a sense, but like simplicity to its core. Even parts of the core standard library are relatively simple, which is nice because you can go and read pretty much all the Go code in Go standard library, including Go itself. But I think a slightly more complex thing is going to be really great for the garbage collector.
That's cool. I think there's a unappreciated hack, which is if you have a program where you can just kill it when it's done, then just run it without garbage collection in Go and try to build programs. If there's some functionality that requires a lot of memory usage, just let it go. No garbage collection and then kill it when it's done.
Yeah. It's actually a classic thing we used to do on Tanzu was we had like little jobs that would spin up and just be like, just go and Kubernetes will kill it eventually. Right?
Yeah.
And then spin up another one and it's fine. You do that at scale and it's sort of hashtag just works, right?
Yeah.
Cool. Well, Brian, did you have a read?
I did have a read, and we brought up Mitchell. Funny enough, the article that I'm going to mention as well, which is the art of chiseling and polishing, is basically around like vibe coding responsibly. Is kind of how I've seen it presented. It's actually from one of the engineers at Continue, but it was inspired by one of Mitchell's threads when he was vibe coding non-trivial ghosty issues. And so if I zoom out, and the idea is like, I want to solve a problem. I've like thrown a bunch of code into orbit. There's two options. You jackhammer, basically, if you're thinking of like a sculptor, like you use the jackhammer to basically remove large pieces of code that's not necessary. And I think at least with the Claude models, you tend to get a lot of cruft that comes along for the ride. And then once you've sort of like remove all the noise, then you start pulling out the chisel. The chisel is like not meant to start deleting like random stuff, but it's actually to actually take some time to really understand different parts of the code that's being added at time of PR or maybe even right before PR. So I spent a lot of time in the summer actually vibe coding some stuff because I wanted to test these tools pretty quickly. Found that really fast that like vibe coding is a great way to go zero detect that pretty quickly. So I've introduced all this other stuff. And funny, I mentioned Ryan Carson. I got super excited about some of the talks he was doing over the summer around spec-driven development and like having tasks. And I started just going down that rabbit hole. And then now I'm at a point where I'm just like fine tuning everything. And I spend way more time just refactoring random files. So I've been setting up a cron to basically go and send a background agent to just randomly refactor things, like make things faster. And then what I've been doing as well is like using background jobs on top of MCPs to then like use the Chrome MCP, which I think does really well for performance, to go find slow pages or slow queries if I'm using my database as well. And just like stuff that I should probably do myself all the time, but because this is stuff I do on the weekends, it's cool to have like a PR that just randomly shows up and I can just read some code and feel like I've got a teammate for my side project that is working alongside me. And then I can decide if I want to close it and redo it at that point or take it for what it's worth. But yeah, chiseling, look it up. I think it's a great article for folks to think about how they're approaching agentic programming.
Nice.
Yeah, that's a good analogy. I like it.
I know some devs who find chiseling to be the most fun part of programming, and they just love a refactor or re-architecture all the time. So find some of those and set them loose in your code base.
Yeah, there you go.
Please, open source folks, please find my project.
Yeah. Well, maybe the best for last. Quinn, you had a read.
Well, this is good. Your call on whether it's the best. It's from Armin Ronacher, called Agentic Coding Things That Did Not Work, from July 30th, 2025, where he talks about some of the features that Claude Code and other coding agents have added that seem promising, but it ultimately didn't stick in his workflow. And I view it as an antidote to all those breathless threads on X where they say, this new thing changes everything. And the person who had 50 different Claude Code custom subagents, like a VP of marketing subagent. And he walks through how he's found that there's a limit to the value of slash commands for him, hooks, the print or execute mode, subtasks, and subagents. And at the time, he was throwing a bunch of very well-deserved cold water on a lot of these features that added a lot of complexity. And as someone who's building an agent, we always want to view these new features as experiments. They could be totally worthless. They could be made obsolete by the next model that comes out. Subagents is a great example. We in Claude Code have these generalized subagents that can spawn off another thread and operate. And some people just think they're so cool, but actually they are net negative now, in our opinion. And so, I hope the Claude Code team takes this feedback or is taking this feedback. We are taking this feedback, and our approach is if something doesn't click and we ship it, then we need to rip it out immediately. And it's good to know that you should not do product development based on what people on Twitter are threadboying about.
I'll +1 that. Quinn, thank you so much for coming on the episode today. Everyone, go check out AMP. Check out AMP Free. And then soon to come, AMP Nights and Weekends. You heard it here first. Remember, listeners, stay ready.
That's all the time we have for today. If you're interested in being a guest on the show, or if you'd like to suggest a topic, find us at x.com/opensourceready. Open Source Ready is brought to you by Heavybit, the leading investor of developer-first startups. For more information, visit heavybit.com.